Well, hello and welcome to the another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I'm here with my friend and colleague Jim Gurley, and as always, we're going to talk about something that is at least touches into the lives of middle-aged men. Sometimes we're very directly related to the topic, and others are a little to the periphery. But today, we're gonna tap into our foundational flywheel. We'll always start in the middle with the self. I think this is probably grasping, but it's self-awareness on a topic that is probably near and dear to everyone's heart that lives in the United States right now, and it radiates out from the center of self to worldview, and within the context of worldview, today's topic is going to be about immigration, and it's a rich topic, it's a polarizing topic, it's getting a lot of attention in the press, and people are on both sides of the fence with this one. But I think, Jim, the most important thing with this, and it's probably the most important thing with any topic, is what what do these words mean? And let's get into a little bit about, because just as a for instance, I'm of the school that if someone comes into this country illegally, then they are an illegal immigrant, right? They're not an undocumented immigrant. And that's just one of many subtopics we can get into. But that's what I mean by what do words mean. So Jim and I picked this one when we were talking beforehand because of a conversation he had, I think, over dinner last night. So Jim, why don't
Mhm.
you jump in and let us understand some more about that?
Yeah. Like you said, Mark, it pushes a lot of different buttons and some real triggers for different people. But the word immigration means a lot of different things. But yeah, tying it to our five areas of life, this would definitely fall in. I'd say the worldview, right?
Yep.
And the self in the center, self reflection. I think we all have an immigration story. I know in your case, for what you've done for many years as far as recruiting people from all over the world, so you have a perspective on immigration. I know when I played rugby, she's towards the end. I think I was the only Pilongi, which means white in Tongan, that was on the field. So every one of those other players were from Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, um, uh, England, Scotland, New Zealand. They were from all over the world. They were all immigrants. So it's I have some strong feelings about it. I also make it a point every time I meet a first generation immigrant. I mean, like here for weren't born here but are here. I thank them. I truly give them a sincere thank you. Without you, we would have no America. And they take risk, they see opportunities, they do things that we would never do as Americans. So I feel good about that. I hope I know they appreciate it, but I feel good by um, acknowledging them. And then I also, when I talk about self reflection, I even think of my grandmother's family coming here from Swiss Italian. So they, especially when I went back to Europe this last summer, you can see your life in that migration from that part of the world, even at that time period, and then to go back there and see where they're from in the Swiss Alps and be a part of that. I think you have more of a connection to that generation of Europeans that migrated here. Um,
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, most of us don't have to go more than a couple generations to understand when our grandparents or great grandparents came here
yeah,
from somewhere else.
yeah,
So to suggest that anyone would be against immigration, I think that would be a silly stance to take. I think there's
yeah.
so many advantages to immigrant. I think my my perspective on it is, I come from Irish roots, among other things. I've got some German in there and some English in there. But when my dad was in Boston in the 20s and 30s, there were still signs up in the stores: "No Irish need apply."
Mhm.
And so, and the Italians were treated very poorly as well.
Mhm.
That's why the
Mhm.
Italians and the Irish became so close in the community. They kind of
Yeah.
us against them, and it was
Well, they
never
also had that Catholic thing in common that helped a little bit
Catholic
too.
thing in common, and they're both storytelling
Yeah.
cultures. So
Yeah.
and sense of humor cultures. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think, and I just recently, the guy next door built a home, and he's a wonderful guy, ex-military guy,
Mhm.
nice wife. And the guys that put up the house, there was, and not to sound crass, it's just true. There's one or two guys that spoke English and 15 guys that didn't. And
Yeah.
I don't know if they were here legally or illegally, and I honestly didn't care. They were being productive, they were smiling and laughing, and they were
Yeah.
enjoying the work, and they were working their asses off.
That's what I
you know
say. Thanks to them, we have economy. We wouldn't be the United States of America if it wasn't for immigration. Everybody is immigrated. It also ties into some, yeah, back to your family migrating from Ireland. Then I even go back to my father's side. Um, Even though my last name is French, it's mostly Spanish, and that time period in that geographical place, even some of this before it was even America, right? But that eventually ties into, you know, who came here first and who gets to say who migrated where. I mean, everybody migrates from one point or another, right? It's kind of a ridiculous conversation. However, I think it's become a very political issue, and in reference to the dinner I had last night, again, great people. It's a business partner. I just signed an exclusive license agreement with one of my patents with him. So it was him and his wife, and she's a school teacher. Um, they're both immigrants from Bosnia, which is interesting because if you in their lifetime, that's they're refugees. That's a whole other level of immigration
Mhm.
because of a country that was at war, and they had to leave. They had to leave their country. I remember even and again, I think a lot of immigrants have that, but it's a good place to start because if they had to flee their country and then often leave behind their father or somebody else to fight a war and then many times never see them again. That's not uncommon, right?
Mhm.
That's a whole other type of immigration. And then they ended up in Spain. So they both speak Spanish, and now they're Americans, and he's built a wonderful business, and she's a school teacher. But she had a really interesting perspective about um, the immigrants today. And again, I want to be careful not to speak for her. Certainly, I'm only speaking for myself. But how much I asked her, that's what I said. Hey, I'd like to get your perspective. Again, no wrong answer on immigration. Being a school teacher in Southern California, she speaks Spanish fluently. So does her husband. 90, I think everybody in that neighborhood speaks Spanish, but they're getting, I said, so what kind of, she goes, oh, it's been pretty, I don't want to say bad, but 30 kids show up with not a lick of English. And she said, the difference now versus say in the past is that this is like how do I say without being disrespectful? It's the bottom of the barrel in terms of humans. Like they have no education. They never even went to school before they came here. So it's just a different um, set of challenges, right? But versus maybe some of the immigration in the past, they'd show up here to seek jobs, but they had some education. But we're it's really difficult to take a in this case an eighth grader and make them and teach them English, let alone teach them what 1 + 1 is. So
Mhm.
it's a whole other level of that. And then she said something I thought was really fascinating about it's just become such a political issue. And isn't that the truth? This is a political football that they everything is done for these political reasons that has created this situation that now we have to that's completely out of control that we have to deal with. And I'm not
Well,
trying to take a position, versus red versus blue or that, but clearly this got worse under the Biden administration to a point now where we're seeing it show up.
Yeah, I
And
mean, there's a few ways to come at this because, like I told you before, as you know, I spent 30 years in large part helping people come to this country for work from all different countries, and I will be the first one to tell you that process is broken even before what's been going on with Biden.
yeah.
And when I say that, I say two things, and I'm not an immigration attorney, but I've talked to a lot of them over the years.
Well, yeah, you have
Those
to work with them, right? To
yeah,
get,
and
yeah,
and those laws change. The complexity of the process is absurd,
yeah.
and the cost of the process is absurd.
Mhm.
So it's almost like we're encouraging this because of that, right? And not to be political, I look for the practical in things
Yeah.
as you do, is we're doing the same thing with immigration that we're doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, electric cars, climate change. We're making decisions without considering the long-term effects of these decisions,
Mhm.
right? It's like, well, there's so much discovery. Like to your point, you can't throw 30 kids who don't speak English into a school in California and not expect to have problems. They don't have the
Yeah.
capacity for that.
Yeah.
That's not fair to the teachers. It's not fair to the
No.
other students. It's not fair to the administrators. It's not fair to the neighborhood. I
Yeah.
mean, and then you tax the healthcare system. I mean, look at what's going on there. This is it's
Yeah.
irresponsible, is what it
It
is.
really is. I'm glad you mentioned the healthcare. Some of these hospitals are going, I don't know if it's going bankrupt because they get some money from the federal government, but they're being flooded with these immigrants with no health insurance. And we
That's not
ultimately have to pay for that.
it's not sustainable. There's a
It shows up on our healthcare premiums, and like you said, it just the ripple effect that it's having on everything is much greater
well,
than people realize.
our healthcare system was fucked up before this. So now
Is
it's
that the truth?
now
Yeah,
it's just more fucked up.
yeah.
But the other thing that comes to mind, and we're not doing this in any particular order, but there's a now infamous young man, Hispanic young man who's getting on, I think, TikTok and telling everyone, come on over. You can get a free house, you can get free food, and
Wow.
if you have a baby over here, you get free citizenship. I mean, he's got a plan that he's actually plugged into, and he's got fancy clothes on, he's got a car, he's got a cell phone. I mean, none of
Yeah.
that did he pay for. And what are the long-term repercussions of that, right?
Well, that was another interesting perspective. Begin because they came as refugees to this country. They have so much appreciation and gratitude for the life it's provided them. But and again, I'm not speaking from what I can detect was this is this is a different type of immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
They're very entitled. They're not grateful at all. Most,
Yes.
I'm not speaking for all of them, but that's not the immigrant way. That you were a guest in this country. You were very grateful. That's gone. That's now it's what have you done for me? It's this kind of this entitlement. And like you said, that comes from our own policy where you're rewarding somebody for one, breaking the law to come here,
Mm-hmm.
and then two, incentivizing them to not to work in some cases, right? Because
Yeah, I mean, it's
of the benefits that we provide them. Yeah.
this bleeds over into other areas too, like reparations and stuff like that, and any form of entitlement. It's parenting 101, that if you give your kids free shit with no expectation of anything in return, like even good behavior or chores, you're fucking that kid up,
Yeah.
right? And that's human nature. You just are. I don't
Yeah.
care. I mean, you talk about your childhood, about getting into fights all the time and playing sports, and it was a rough existence. It was
Yeah.
and you know what? You know what? As a result of that, you can handle just about anything life throws at you, right?
Yeah.
Not that things are easy for you, not that things are easy
Yeah.
for me all the time. I'm just saying, what happened to fortitude as on the wish list of
Yeah.
qualities of life? This goes up against, this contradicts so much of human nature. That's another thing that tires me about politics. It's like, you can't force behaviors. You
Yeah.
just can't. People are who they are, right? You can
Yeah.
structure the society with a certain number of laws that operate as guardrails. If you shoot someone, you go to jail, right? If you do something illegal, you get punished. We're not even punishing people for crimes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
well, it
not just,
speaks to,
it's
it
not just,
reminds me of some other things that the conversation came from, but it was about how, and I'm only speaking for California. I can't speak for other states, but I think it's applied. The whole system is incentivized. These kids are their revenue devices, what they are, right?
Mhm,
Every kid gets X amount of money from the federal government. But
mhm,
what's kind of sad, at least I'm speaking for California, and I have another very good friend that's a school teacher as well, and I'm pretty involved with the schools. Uh, in fact, I was at the high school last week. So, but you can't discipline like you could when we were growing up. You can't. And
no.
so when I say no discipline, these kids, I guess recently they did away with expelling a kid. So it used to be if a kid screwed up, he could get expelled and he get kicked out. You can't do that anymore. So guess
Mm,
what? The kid, she says it's out of control.
yeah.
These kids have no fear because there's no punishment. There's no consequences for what they do. And at the end of the day, the 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 state doesn't want to lose the revenue of kicking the kid out. So they'll keep them in, and this behavior just gets worse and worse and worse because there's no consequences. That's our own government that has created laws and created has passed um, initiatives um, that allow this. So as
Yeah.
a result,
Yeah.
a lot of teachers are quitting or getting out of teaching because in some cases not even safe.
I have a good friend, and I'm in Florida, which is
Yeah,
like the bizarro world of California.
yeah, yeah. That's true.
and
Yeah,
and so it's not as bad here, but I have a good friend whose wife is a teacher for 25 years, and she's a real estate agent now. And I said,
yeah,
it wasn't because of immigration, because immigration hasn't touched us yet, because of what Ron DeSantis is doing. But she said, no, I was tired of people telling me what I could or couldn't say.
yeah,
So it's like this control, this everything's okay. There's no responsibility, there's no
yeah.
accountability, and don't be mean to people who are doing bad things, because that's not nice. Like, what?
Well,
How
that's
did
my
this
first
conversation?
question was, well, where's the teachers union? And boy, did I get a roll of the eyes there,
I
right?
bet you. I thought, or either that or a howling laugh. Yeah. I mean, the
Which
teachers.
is they're supposed to be protecting the teachers. That's another political device. That's been used. It starts at the federal level and then it just trickles right down where it makes absolutely no sense at all in the classroom or on the playground.
Well, you know what, Jim, reminds me of I've said to you before about my divorce. It was just like, why aren't we walking into the courtroom and the first thing the judge says is, everyone here, just understand there's only one focus today, and that is what's in the best interest of the children. That never happened. Okay. And the teachers union is not just supposed to be protecting the teachers. They're supposed to be protecting the kids, you
Yeah.
know, and we're not protecting the kids. I mean, I think I would love to see back where, you know what, two kids are in a fight in the hallway. Let's just see what happens, and if
Oh, I tell you
somebody's,
that you want to sort out some problems
yeah,
or end it.
yeah, just step away. No
Yeah.
third party. Anybody that jumps in for the third person in gets
Yeah.
expelled or suspended. I think happened before expulsion, but
Oh, it was after school on the other side of the gate and you'd sort it out there.
it was,
And
for us, it was at the big oak tree down at the cemetery.
that's right. And the
Yeah.
teachers, they know it would get sorted out. But now, did you know it's not outside the gate anymore? The teachers reach goes beyond that. The school is responsible for the child, even when he leaves the school property. If it's anything related to school at all, they have jurisdiction now to be involved in what
That's
goes
that's
on.
that's that's fascist. It's
Well, it
like,
really
and,
is.
and we're
When you
also,
break it down, it's complete
it's control.
control
Yeah.
from the top all the way down.
Yeah. No, I think, to circle it, to reconnect it to immigration, I think that from the school systems to public transportation. If I lived in New York, I would never get on the subway again, you know,
Yeah,
and healthcare we talked about, education we talked about, but all of the other things that this thing touches on, if we continue to allow people to come over the southern border without accounting for anything, what about
mhm,
disease? What
yeah,
about vaccinations?
Yeah.
What about, I heard there's cases of tuberculosis. Are we going to have polio again? I mean, there has to be control. And I don't think it has to be complicated. I think it has to be, okay, why are you here? And then, you're going to get truth from some and lies from most. Well, how can we vet that? Well, we have a pretty advanced technological infrastructure. We ought to be able to say this guy is who he is, or this guy isn't who he is, or
Mhm.
gal, or whatever. And let's get some traction on. You're telling me they're coming over here to seek refuge. I'm like, how come they're all like 18 to 32 men and
Yeah.
single? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah.
Like, where do we know where these people are going?
Yeah.
No. Do we want to? Doesn't matter. Well, it does eventually when the mayor of New York steps up and says that sanctuary city stuff. I should have probably thought that through a little better.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
You wonder how this is going to affect this upcoming election. I mean, one side would think, well, they like the Biden administration because they're, pretty much an open borders policy, and they'll get more votes. But think about that. They shouldn't be voting if they're not here illegally. So, right. So it's
Well,
not like they
that's
get a vote.
yeah.
But if I guess they get a vote in a couple generations from now or
Well,
whenever.
the politicians are doing with this what they do with everything, and they're obfuscating. They're trying to take our eye off the ball. It doesn't matter what side you're on. They're people just change the subject on you. They get you going in another direction. It's like my understanding, and am I 100% sure of this? I guess not, but I'm like 99% sure, is that the president, Trump, signed an executive order to clamp down on the border. Now that means whatever. There's a lot of specifics to that. It involves a wall. It involves, border patrol agents. It involves budgets, but that that was our numbers were relative to history. They were excellent. And then one of the first things Biden did was overrule that executive order, which also means that with the stroke of a pen, Biden could stop this right now. And what they've done is suggested that no, he doesn't have the power to do that, which I believe he does. And what we did instead of that is we put a law in place to address this, and the Republicans wouldn't put it through. And
Is
what
that
that really
is
is,
that true? Yeah.
what that really is yeah, they did. They put a law up for consideration that did have some things to address immigration, but it also earmarked like another $80 billion for Ukraine and some other stuff that was like nothing to do with immigration. And it's like they do that all the time. Both
Oh,
sides do it.
interesting. I was wondering how that worked out. So they
They
put that
they
up, but it was attached to something else.
it always is, Jim.
Always it is. Yeah,
It's
that's
always presented as one thing when it's in fact a lot of different things, some of which are not good,
yeah.
right? Some of which so I agree with this, and you're calling me a hypocrite. You're setting me up. I'm not a hypocrite.
Yeah.
You're not sharing the
The full
context,
story, the
the full
context.
story.
Yeah.
They do that with everything.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
frustrating.
because it's all about headlines. Um,
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know how. I don't know. I don't want to get too far off topic, but that Don Lemon interview with Elon Musk was one of the funniest fucking things I've ever seen in my life. And it's just like the media. What is up with the media? There's
I have to just say that Don Lemon, that guy's a piece of shit. He really is. He is a piece of shit. I,
oh
I
he's
don't know what other way to describe him. On
I
every way, he's
yeah, yeah,
pretentious. He's arrogant. He thinks he knows things, but he doesn't know anything.
he's
Oh,
disingenuous.
he
He's
really
disingenuous.
is.
Yeah, he's a yeah, and
Yeah.
he's so blatantly, and then he goes on The View,
Yeah.
and they all kiss his ass,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
That's his
disgusting.
audience, though.
Yeah,
He feeds his audience. You got to give him credit for that. So
yeah, but I don't think the media is helping us with this immigration thing at all. I think
yeah.
that I was following a guy when I was listening to Newsmax for a while, and they had a guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy lives down on the border. He's not an agent, but his background is quite credible, and he's down there with cameras and he's showing pictures, and they're completely the opposite of what we're being shown on the news. And that we clean stuff up when the cameras come. I don't even think our president has actually been on the border, right?
Yeah.
And I think our border czar Cackles, she's been there once or twice. But
Yeah.
they don't even go down to the border. They go down
No.
to a suburban town where there's no exposure.
Yeah.
It's disingenuous. It's false. It's misrepresentation,
Yeah.
and it's like, if we can't represent it accurately, how can we fix it?
Well, let's
Uh,
finish up on a positive. Share with me a one of your favorite immigrant stories. Could be through work, just an immigrant story, right? Where that they came here at this point in their life, and then you fast forward 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and this is this outcome. And I'm sure you have some, but what, and I've got a couple I'm thinking through right now. But share with me. Could it be a guy that you got a job and then he meets somebody and has a family here? But give me a positive immigration story, because I like to focus on how important immigration is. We certainly don't want to stop immigration, but we have to facilitate these people that want to come here with new ideas and ambition and all that. It's such an important part of who we are as a country.
yeah, well, I mean, I have different angles on that. I've got hundreds of people that I've been engaged with as they were going through the immigration process, but it's been probably 10 years.
Mhm.
So I don't have any fresh ones. The thing that popped into my head was my younger brother had his years ago, had his kids, maybe 5, 6,
Mhm.
7 years ago, had his kids in one of the most prestigious private schools in Nashville.
Mhm.
And he talked often about an Iranian couple, husband and wife, and they were both doctors, and their kids were very well behaved, very bright, good athletes, just well-rounded kids. And they would, and he would, my brother would speak to them at, volleyball games and picnics and stuff, and they would always talk about how grateful they were for the opportunity to come here and what it was like in Iran, 20, 30 years ago. And they both came here. They both came here to get an education, and then after getting educations and getting their degrees, their medical degrees, had thriving practices. I can't remember their specialties, but they would talk. They didn't understand, like really didn't understand, how we Americans didn't get that this is bad, right?
Yeah.
That if you
Yeah,
let people like us in the right way, we bring a ton to the party,
they
right?
do.
And we'll be grateful, we'll be
Yeah.
loyal, we
Yeah.
love this place, we would never go back to Iran.
Yeah.
And we to your point, we had left relatives that we'll never see again. And so, but it was 100% worth it. You guys have to knock this off. You can't
Yeah.
keep letting these people in. They're not who you think they are.
Yeah.
And that I think about that couple often, and I've never even met them. I just remember how my brother used to tell me, because that school was full of very liberal people. These two Iranian doctors
Yeah,
were not
we
were not
absolutely
two of them.
benefited from the Iran. A lot of smart engineers, a lot of smart business people, and
Yeah.
yeah, we came out pretty good on that one too. I'll share a couple. The first one I want to share with, and again, this I think one of my favorite ones. I'm not gonna say his name, but it'll be obvious who he is. So this is years ago. We were playing rugby, and he shows up. He's from Scotland, so he shows up. One of our practices, obviously a real good player, smart guy, but he was working for Safeway, the grocery store chain, and so we were traveling. At that point, we were traveling different times of the year, these different playoffs games, and he and I would become roommates often because we're the only Pelongis, right? They were the Tongass guys, but he was telling me the reason he got here is he I think he lost his father or something, but he was dyslexic like me. And so in the 8th grade, they have to take a test. I forgot what it's called, to determine where you're going to go with your career. And he had to, I think he broke his own finger or smashed his hammer on his finger to not take the test the way everybody else was.
Wow.
A remarkable story. It's a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then he does really well because he takes the test orally because he couldn't write,
Mm-hmm.
and he passes it. Then he gets into a pretty good college, and then eventually comes here to the U.S. on contract for some contract. Turns out he's the guy that was one of the creators of when you go to a grocery store and put your phone number in the system, and then it tracks you. That was one of his first projects. He was on that team, was a big part of that. And then he goes on and just keeps getting promoted. Now he's he's the number 2 guy for Kroger's grocery store. I saw him in France for the Rugby World Cup. We bumped into each other and spoke to him. Great guy, but yeah, now and of course he married an American girl, lives in Cincinnati, and he's the number 2 guy for the largest grocery store chain in the world.
Yeah, there's so
Yeah,
many of those stories that we don't.
yeah,
And the other thing about it is, I would almost guarantee you, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only people that know that guy's story are people that are near and dear to him. He's not
yeah.
bragging about that. He's not
No,
bragging
no, he's
about
the most
anything.
humble guy, and
Yeah,
even
that's right.
again, we had talked a few months last year before we ran into each other at the World Cup in Paris, but he's the most he's just a great story about somebody that is obviously has achieved a very, very high level of success, but very humble, loves America. He said, look at, I'm the American dream, right? I'm the
Yeah,
story
yeah. That's
to
what a
go
one.
from
Yeah,
that and that. So that's a
yeah.
cool. And then I'll share another one too. So this is years ago when we built the house here. Um, yeah, kids were really young when we moved in, and it was new construction. So I get this knock on the door. I open up the door, and it's and this lady doesn't speak a lick of English. Says, "Can I clean your house?" And I said, "Huh?" She goes, "Yeah, I clean houses. Can I clean your house?" And I'm like, because there's a bus stop in front of at the end of the street or right near my house. So she took a bus, got off the bus stop, walked down the driveway, knocked on the door, and said, "Can I clean your house?" I said, "Yeah, actually, by the way, you can come on in." She started coming in, started cleaning. She's cleaned our house every other week, and it's now 20 years later. She has a thriving cleaning business. She has a beautiful daughter. She's fantastic. I mean,
It's
she's like a part of the family.
yeah, no, that's a great story. I think you've shared that with me before.
Yeah,
It's worth telling over and over again because
it is.
there's so many positive things to that.
Yeah,
Like just what kind of balls it takes to come knocking on some big rich white guy's door. You just got into town, you don't have any resources at all. I love that. I
yeah,
just love that. And no,
yeah.
I
Like,
think
the
that
funniest part was like, "How'd you get here?" And then
yeah.
she points to the bus stop.
Well,
Makes
that
sense, right? She just
yeah,
walked. Yeah.
it
I,
does.
I I
It
mean, when
does.
I say, Mark, I'm talking like 50 yards. That's the bus stop from
Yeah.
the house, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if you were the first house she knocked on.
it doesn't matter.
So,
She's got a thriving business. She owns a home.
yeah, good for her. And
Yeah.
this is the thing: the people that are for un ungoverned immigration, like just come on over and go everywhere.
Mhm.
They don't tell those stories.
Yeah.
They don't share that context. I mean, who would possibly be against what you just said?
Yeah. So
No one.
one last
No
one to
one.
wrap this up. This is a good one too. Remember Vietnam when back in the 70s, how bad that was?
Hmm.
The refugees that were on the boats and this and that. So this common friend, um, he comes over. He barely makes it off the boat. Somehow he does. Grabs his kids and his wife, and I think they get separated for a period of time. But really, really bad stuff. Um, they come here. He gets in the financial service business. The wife starts a dry cleaning business, so that's what they did. The daughters now, of course, they're bilinguals, but the daughter she worked for Rumfield. That remember the
Hmm.
Secretary of State
Yeah.
for his office, and yeah, she's part of the whole international um, at the highest level of government, and that's his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and the other, and of course, she has her master's degree, and she's been all over the world. And but that's, you talk about somebody appreciated the United States for taking them when there was nowhere to go, right?
Hmm.
And hearing his stories about being on a boat for weeks on end on a raft to get here. with his
Oh yeah, yeah.
wife and
No, I
children.
mean, I don't think
And
we have any appreciation for for what
yeah,
some of these people are willing to go through when they're truly
yeah,
refugees.
yeah,
You know, I think to for my conclusion, I would just ask people to, this is a topic that needs to be discussed, and it needs to be discussed without animosity, without personalization, without accusation or blame. It just needs to say, okay, what are the repercussions of not having any guardrails to our immigration process?
yeah,
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your friend, the teacher. Let's talk about what's happening to our schools and our healthcare. So do we have the resources to accommodate this many people when those systems are fucked up already?
yeah,
Right? No, we don't. So there at least needs to be a plan. It's my biggest complaint about giving money to Ukraine. I'm like, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, but do we know what the fuck they're doing with it? We don't have a plan for any of this stuff. We're just implementing things and positioning them as being compassionate when in fact most of them are the opposite of compassionate. You know,
yeah.
children are dying, they're being sexually abused, you know, criminals are coming into the country. This is not a compassionate move. This is a
Right.
stupid
If
thing
you
to
really
do.
cared about humans and humanity, you wouldn't let the drug traffickers and all of the crime that goes with it.
That's a whole nother podcast, dude.
Yeah,
That's a whole nother
yeah.
podcast.
So
But you're
anyway,
absolutely 100% correct. We're not keeping track of anything. We're not holding people accountable, and we're not thinking. I mean, what business would you give money to that wasn't able to present you with a 3 to 5 year plan? You wouldn't, right? What are the long-term repercussions of what's happening right now?
yeah,
We're not even considering them, but
yeah,
we're facing them. I'm not facing them yet, but they're going to show up on our doorsteps. They already are in some places, and what's going to happen with that? I hope it's good. I hope we finish. I hope we fix this, whatever
yeah,
that looks like.
yeah. Good place to wrap it up, Mark.
Sounds good, Jim. That was
All
fun.
right. Yeah.
All right. See you.